Hello and welcome to Mr. Clark After Dark, everyone. My name is Lucas Clark and I am a certified educator with Alberta Education and the Alberta Teachers Association. All conversations and interactions exchanged is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. In no way does the content discussed intend to be in violation of the ATA Code of Conduct or meant to target any individual student, teacher, or to belittle or demean the profession in any way. If you have something that you would like me to discuss or have a story of your own to share, please reach out at lucasrdclark97@gmail.com. You can also send a direct message to me on Instagram at Mr. Clark After Dark. Hope you enjoy the show, and please do not forget to subscribe. And now, on to the show. Hope you all enjoy. Hello again, friends, and welcome to part 2 of the episode with Kelly Haldane. Kelly is currently a junior high humanities teacher who has been in the profession for more than a decade. On part 2 of the episode, her and I discuss juggling different student personalities, teacher guilt, the lack of a need for report cards, the transition from teacher at school to teacher on call mentality, what the barriers between teachers and parents should be, the no zero policy dilemma, and how students used to be afraid of homework checks, teacher autonomy, our experience on the Minister's Teacher Advisory Council, and much more. Thank you all for tuning in and hope to see you guys next time. Enjoy. How do you think that guilt is transferred? Where does that come from? I don't... Because it seems unique to this job.
Yeah. I think it's very similar to the way that women can sometimes be their own gender's worst enemy, and we will call each other names based on what we're wearing or who we're hanging out with, and these things this whole same internalized self hate that just teachers have decided to pick up as well, and it works well for the system, right? They have us controlling ourselves now. It's great.
It is. Well, it's almost like it's not necessarily self-censorship, but it's self guilt for not doing more, because I find it like last year I have my lovely rocket book here from my organizer, and when I would put out my list of current responsibilities, when I had all my extracurriculars and things I was involved in, I had 8 things on my list.
That's too much.
But one of the 8 things was my course load and my marking. I'm like, how is that one of the 8 things that I'm currently involved in and doing? That's one thing I did not anticipate coming into teaching was, I always knew it was, I guess I always assumed if you do extracurriculars, it would always be appreciated no matter what, never expected. And that's the part, and I'm not saying anyone here has been whatever, but because it comes across as, well, if you don't do it, then someone else has to do more. And so that's always the common, and there's always the complaints of the same people do the same sports all the time. So there's a few things that I've withdrawn from in the past year, and every time that I have withdrawn, everyone's been super understanding. But when it comes to my lead up to that withdrawal, the internal battle I have in my mind of what I'm trying to, of how they might react, or I just feel, I'm like, oh, maybe I can do it. Maybe I can find a way to make it work, or maybe I can do that. But I don't know. That's been one of the surprises for me. And so for teaching expectations, that's been something I always hear, oh, teaching used to be so good back in the day. And I find there's always this, I always err on the side of nostalgia is not always what people think it is. So has teaching changed in your time?
Oh my God, yes. So it's so different.
But it's only been 15 years, right? So why is it so different, and how do you think?
I've tried to figure this one out. I think a couple things have really made a difference. The workload in some ways has gotten heavier in terms of you're not just teaching curriculum. You're dealing with so many other things on top of that. And you're really juggling a lot in a classroom of a lot of personalities and a lot of bodies and all of that. And
so
then,
sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I get that one a lot too, but wouldn't that have always kind of been the same? Like having a lot of personalities and a lot of students? Like that's, I don't know, like I'm speaking from a place of ignorance here.
Certainly
but I'm not
in
sure.
like an elementary classroom, you know, like when I taught elementary, absolutely. Like, yes.
Okay.
In my experience of high school level, no, I didn't have to juggle personalities or needs. People just came in, and even with my like what we called workplace level language arts classes, I had like smaller groups then, and they knew they came in, they got their workout, we did the things, and they left. Sometimes we had an attitude in there, and then you just kicked them out, and they left. Like, this is high school. I don't need to babysit you anymore. If you can't come in and do things, go away. And they did. And then more the academic levels, well, they had a goal. They needed to go to university. They needed to get their grades. So they came in, they did the things, and then they left. I didn't have to deal with their drama or their phones or their TikToks or their any of that. I didn't need to know any of that. Did I get to know their personalities? Yeah. Did I still care about them? Sure.
It's like there's more levels of policing almost
there's more policing. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think a couple things. So like phones, the existence of a cell phone is the bane of my existence. And then report cards have changed a lot in terms of how detailed they are. We certainly in elementary school, we always wrote long commentaries and things like that. And that makes sense at an elementary level.
You've one class too.
But at a high school level, we used to have like a drop down, and you pick a couple comments and you send it off, and that was it. You put in your numbers, you pick a couple comments. So and so sits in their seat.
Well, and so this was and this was kind of the flip side of the how do teachers manage their time better. And I'm trying not trying to say that like it's our fault by any means, but when it comes to like what things are kind of the waste of time, like report cards to me,
huge waste of time,
like
flat out.
We do it, especially like in high school at least. Do you guys do it in junior high mid-year as well? I can't remember, because I guess we have to do it every semester.
January and June.
But I mean, I'm typing out, I would say 30 hours.
Yeah, easily. Yeah.
If not more, to do one semester's report cards, because they say like, oh, every student needs a personal comment. And so I always do like a description of course, but I'll go through it. And again, I find it's almost like marking, where I find I don't mind doing it, but it's when I'm doing it, I just hate myself because I just think this is yielding nothing.
Yep.
Because one, no one's going to read this.
They don't read them.
And there's 120 of them. And they're going to be like, oh, and if they do read them, it's like, oh, that was nice. And they go on with their day. It's not this consequential. All they care about is the number next to the comment. They don't actually care about that comment. So I don't know.
And in today's age, like they have constant access to that, right? Like they can go on to their system, go Power School, and be like, oh, okay, you got to this. Okay.
Like my parents had no idea what my mark was till the end of the semester. So that made sense. Like maybe you do like a progress report midway through where there's no comment, but you bring the marks home. I remember getting those. You actually bring the letter home, and I'd be shitting myself walking in and giving my mom the progress report.
You don't know what's in there even, right? And it was sealed up.
Like, I don't even know what my grade is.
What is this going to be?
I remember in high school even, teachers would actually be kind of secretive with me about what my grade was. Yeah, they'd be like, don't worry about it. Like, just work on this assignment. Like, if I have an issue, we'll talk about it. So I didn't actually really know what my grade was that often. But now you see it on Power School all the time. And again, constantly. It's almost like, why isn't there just an embracing of the technology that now we can remove some of our old traditional stuff?
Exactly. So
it's not even like I don't want to do report cards. It's why isn't there just like, oh, we don't need, this is obsolete. Redundant. Yeah, like it's just not necessary anymore.
Pick a lane.
Yeah.
Driving that one.
Well, it's also, you can contact me whenever you want.
I know. That's my other thing, is that what has made teaching so different is that constant contact.
Yeah. And so some teachers have their Gmail on their phone with notifications. I don't do that.
I don't look at my email on the weekend. I need that barrier.
Yeah.
And I'm not even saying like all the emails are bad or whatever, but like it's time consuming stuff a lot of the time that if you just read your course outline, then we wouldn't have to have this conversation.
So true. And like I'll even, so actually, for example, I looked at my email this morning and one of my students emailed me and they're like, hey, can you let me know what the schedule is again for the essays and the tests that we have? And I've had it on my board all month. And I sent an email out last week with the schedule for all my classes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, but even it seems harmless, but when you have 10 of those a week, that's 2 hours.
Yep.
Or like an hour at least of responding and taking the time and taking away from something where it's, because I find email probably wouldn't have been something that would have been a normal.
No, we were told, we had email, we had school emails. Yeah. We were told never to email with parents ever when I started.
What?
Yeah, it was like a line. Like they were like, no, this is I remember the Ontario College of Teachers had a article about it and like talking about how like it's too personal and you don't know how that might come back on you later.
Yeah.
And so you never would email with parents ever. You get a meeting. If it's something that you need to talk about, you meet.
Or you call.
Yeah.
And it was, sorry.
Yeah, it was a flat out, like, you don't email.
And so when was that, roughly?
2008, 2009. Yeah. And yeah, same thing when I worked in a private school in Toronto area. I didn't ever email parents. Yeah. We always called or they came to get their kids and we'd speak.
So like what should the relationship between a parent and teacher be? Because I find, I don't think my parents went to a PTI after grade 7. And again, like I'm always, maybe that's not for the best.
I'm trying to remember if my parents, I think my dad did. My dad was very like, he was involved and he was like, he was going to the things and mostly it was to keep me in line. Yeah. Well, again,
but honestly, I find there's school events. That's when you show up and talk to the teacher. Yep. And there's like there's games you can go watch, or maybe you sit down next to one of the teachers and you have a conversation, and that's fine. Like it's almost more like less formal, like actually, or you like call the principal, and say, hey, like I have a concern with so and so. Can we have a meeting? Right. That's so different than like I'm gonna pour my heart out to you on this email and tell you why you're the worst thing since.
The excuses, so and so.
There's a lot more excuses I find.
Don't like each other anymore, and you need to know the whole story of how that happened, and here's the things, and now I need you to understand why my kid's assignment is late. I don't care. Just get them to do it and make the late assignment for me, and I'll mark it.
I'm not allowed to give you a 0, so just give in when you can, I guess.
Exactly. We have no autonomy on that at all. Yeah.
I find there's. So I always knew with standardization, there was probably less autonomy anyway, because I always say pretty much to all my grade 10 students, now we are in a 3-year path to your diploma. Like that's the reality. And it'll, especially if you decide to fast track, it's possible if you're in grade 10 now, you could be writing this diploma next year. Yeah. Like it's not actually as far away as you think. And so I find the focus on that does pull away from some autonomy, but like, I'm trying to think, what would it mean how do you channel some autonomy into like kind of the knowing that you really don't have much, like what are some things that you do to remain autonomous?
I have made very like black and white expectations in my classroom and I stand by them. Okay. So, this whole, I sound like an old lady. This whole thing about like late assignments, my goodness, when I was in high school, if you did not turn in your work when you were supposed to turn in your work, you were terrified. Yes. Like you better come to school and say your mom dropped dead at breakfast.
You were waiting until they came to you to check your homework and you were just shaking.
We had, so like my high school that I graduated from, I had like a lot of like farm kids. So we had a lot of buses. Mm-hmm. So I still remember I went in for I think it was my grade 11 science exam, and we wrote in the gym in rows and the silence.
The worst environment.
Right? But I mean, if you're going to end up going to university and college, that's how you'd write then too.
I know.
So
it's like how, and I understand.
Suck it up, get
like,
used to it.
The accommodations are, I've never been one who's needed them personally, but there's something about the grit that is developed by writing a 2-hour standardized exam.
And you're all going through the same experience.
In a gymnasium, you line up, you look for your name on the sheet, and you just go.
Yeah. You just go. You sit in your seat and you do it. So, yeah, we were sitting in our seats, and there had been a bus that had gotten in an accident on the way into school.
Okay.
And, every kid on that bus was still expected. They weren't hurt. So, like, they were checked out or whatever. And then they were sent to go write their exam. I kid you not. And they had, like, the walk of shame on the way in. And they were not given extra time. It was like, too bad, suck it up, get it done.
Which is...
You would not... I mean, that's pretty extreme. But, like, you wouldn't get that now.
I know. And the time thing is, I almost find... people are asking for more and more when there's less and less. Yeah. And I know that's a lot of the rhetoric that's usually kind of tossed around. But even besides like the testing and accommodations and stuff, for marking, how have you actually made that process more efficient for yourself? Or have you? Is there a way?
There is. I work. A lot of my classes are language arts, so it's a heavy marking kind of world. Yeah. I make sure that everything that they do is actually valuable. I don't take in like every scrap thing that they do and mark it. But at the same time, so when they do something, it has value. Yeah. And it is very clear cut from the beginning what is expected. And then I mark any moment that I can sit down and mark things during the day. Yeah. And when things come in late, and I have kids turn stuff in right at the beginning of class. So I call them up one at a time and I'm like, give me your work. And they do. And so I keep that in alphabetical order because that's the way my mind works. Yeah. And then if they don't have theirs, I go ahead, put it in missing, and I put in that 0 because that's what lights a fire for some of them. Yeah. And then when kids turn something in late to me, I have a form they have to fill out. So it puts the onus back on them. They can't just like randomly drop something on my desk or flip something over on Google Classroom, whenever. And I have to go back constantly and search for that. Like, that's not on me. I gave you the work. I asked you to do it, to turn it in, and you chose not to. So now it's your responsibility. Yeah. So they fill out this form. It's not like anything crazy, your name, the assignment, when you're turning it in, why it's late. And then I use that form once I keep them by my desk. Once a week I go through and see if there's any late things, and then I mark it off as checked in on, and I write down what day they turned it in. And then when I get to it, I get to it. Yeah. Because it was late, so it wasn't valuable to them. So parents know it was handed in. And I make it very clear at the beginning of the year in my course outline how I process late things. Okay. And that's
one thing I need to work on. Is I always find it funny when students will hand me late work and they'll say, can you mark it fast? My mom's pissed.
My mom's mad. I'm grounded until this is marked. Well, I guess you're going to spend the next 2 months in your bedroom, but not my problem. Yeah. And I don't have sympathy for that.
Like, because that's the thing. I've almost gotten to the point where I usually say I don't accept anything after the day of the unit test for that unit. So that'll be like those assignments. Yep. But then it's also, we can't give zeros that are permanent. So it's like, how do you reconcile that? So do you usually just, like, if I hand something into you 2 months late and I filled out your form for something we did September 5th. Like,
I'm not accepting
so
it.
how would you, so like, how do you?
I'll go to battle on that one. I will die on that hill. Okay. I don't care. Okay. I will die on that hill. Yeah. So in my course outline, as I said, it says every time we finish a unit, you have 1 week from the end of that date, and I email it out. We finished our unit. You have 1 week to get everything in from that. If you're somebody who didn't do anything, you're going to be a busy, busy duck. Yeah. And then I will mark all those late things at the end of that unit when they're in.
Okay, so you give yourself like a second, because that's been my thing of like, I'll go on Google Classroom. Of my 35 students, 17 have handed it in. And I'm like, well, what's the point of taking my hour here on this lovely Saturday morning to go through my marking when I have to do it all again for the same assignment? And then, so I like the 1 week cutoff. That's a good, like you're giving the second chance at the 0.
Yeah. That is a grace period, in my opinion.
I haven't found that line in terms of, like, it'll be December and kids who are failing will hand in their September assignment. And I'm like, but I guess it's like,
you right now,
I know.
right?
And I'm like, why?
In my head, I am kicking you.
Yeah.
Just so you know, I actually
kicking me or the kid?
Them.
Both?
Like, both actually. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I feel like it needs to be communicated much more strongly as a school, leaving teachers to deal with that individually, because, you know, they will have softer teachers who are going to bend over backwards for them and say, yeah, I'll, you know, take X amount of time out of my personal life to mark all your late work. Thank you so much for that. And
just like the good teacher you should be, right?
And then they get me, and I am not going to do it.
Yeah, I know one of the best compliments I'll hear students, even from last year, they come in like, yeah, you got way more strict after I left. I'm like, no big deal or anything. Not that I'm really not. Like, I find when it comes to being strict, I just don't have that bone in my body. I'm getting better at it, being more consistent with my expectations. I find that's what I'm getting better at. And I'm getting better at, like, shut up. Like, and I've gotten better at, like, shaming kids to their face in front of the whole class. That. Well, I'm just like, you're just, but usually I find in high school, especially in the academic classes, if there's kids that are frigging around, they shame themselves. Like, other students will be like, what are you doing? Like, stop. Like, he's trying to teach us this lesson.
We're trying to get on with
this like things. We're actually trying. Like, this is not whatever. So I find maybe overall I deal with less of it in the high school, especially in the academic stream, but still trying to apply that expectation more has been a challenge that I do think I'm getting a little bit better at. But anyway,
it's a process though. Like, that's what this career is. You're always evolving and changing, and it is a process. Last week I had a grade 8 student tell me, he goes, you know, miss, like, you're funny but also kind of mean at the same time. And I don't know how I feel about that.
So you mean hilarious?
Yeah. Right. Oh God.
All right, so last year, I kind of knew you a little bit from the school, like saying hi by the printer, whatever. And then, boom, we're on the Minister's Teacher Advisory Council together.
So official.
So official. So what was that? Like, what were you? So the Minister's Teacher Advisory Council, how would you even explain what that is? It's like, literally, it's a teacher advisory council where there's 40 people chosen from all over the province. I remember seeing you on the first Zoom call, and I was like, oh, shoot. But how did you even get, like, how did you find out about that?
I read my email, which I never do. It was an off day, clearly. And I saw that had been sent out, and I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. It sounds like something I can do that maybe, and if it might not affect change, but at least someone knows my opinion. And
which is not nothing.
Thank you. And also, honestly, it was a good way to put something on your resume that didn't seem like it was too much work.
I spoke to the minister. What are you doing? So, like, how would you, I guess, because we signed an NDA, right? And so, but then even when I asked questions with the NDA, they're like, oh, no, like, you can still talk to all your staff about this. And I was like, I guess it's maybe you just don't say specifically what other people may have said.
I think so.
That could have been.
Like in any kind of confidential government.
Yeah, like to maybe to like demean them or diminish them in some way or whatever. Like if you all of a sudden started talking trash about our admin and I was like, hey, Kelly said this about our admin, that would make sense. Which you definitely didn't. But do you think that was like a useful experience? Like how would you kind of summarize what that was like? Because really, so we had 3 meetings. We were supposed to have 4.
Yeah.
It was always on Sunday afternoons. Still sad that we couldn't go to Edmonton.
I know.
But it was interesting. I
agree. It was interesting. It was nice to see other teachers around the province.
Yeah.
And get the feeling of what their lived experience was.
Yeah.
And find out what they were doing to survive.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy that aspect. Overall, though, I don't know how effective the experience was in terms of, I think it was just a good way to make people feel like their voices were being heard, but I don't know if any of it will ever really impact.
Well, because this was kind of my qualm, was there literally is nothing else you can do than literally sit in a room and speak to the person who's making the calls in government. But I found even with the way it was set up, it was still yielding almost nothing.
Yeah.
That was kind of the impression I got. And you can only do so much when you have 2 minutes in a Zoom group. I don't even know what that would be called, like your breakout groups.
Yeah.
And where you're like, I said something about the mending the EA relationships between like more experienced EAs and younger teachers. I found that to be like, not that I've ever had a problem, but it was a weird dynamic to be the teacher who's kind of teaching the class, who's kind of the, not the boss, but like the person who's kind of in charge in the room, and having a more experienced EA who obviously could likely teach the course a lot better than you could. That was kind of the weird thing I had that I talked about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't, like, what do you think? What were your kind of thoughts on it overall? Would you do it again? Like, what was the...
I'd do it again.
Yeah.
It wasn't a bad experience. I do feel like it may have been more productive if they hadn't had such like a divide between the teachers and the minister. Like it felt very formal and it felt very like, and now we're introducing the minister. And you're like, oh dude, like, okay. We get it. And I don't know.
Honorable minister.
Right. And I don't know if it's because I worked at the Alberta Council of Women's Shelters, and so I met a lot of government people there.
Okay.
Mayors, former mayors, people in provincial government, people in federal government would just like walk in. Like I met Rona Ambrose. She just walked in one day. I was like, hi, I'm here for a meeting. I'm like, yeah, you are. And like, I know a lot of them are very just like, whatever, it's my job and you have a job and we have jobs. And then I felt like when we did this advisory council, it was very like, and you are the little people. Yeah. And we are the fancy political people. Yeah. And we're gracing you with our presence so you can tell us our opinion. Yeah. And we'll write it down.
Well, and so I even remember there was one specific conversation. I don't know what it was about, but I think it had to do with EA funding, where they were like, we went from like 123 million to 128 million. Like I remember whatever, but I'm like, what does that mean to me? What does that $5 million, like explain what that $5 million does? And usually when it comes to the overall school funding or funding per student, I glaze over because I don't know what is needed or what all that kind of stuff. But I found it was definitely interesting. A lot of gassing up. Yeah, I remember it was a little strange, but yeah, I don't know. It was a pleasure serving with you on the council, though. It was definitely interesting.
But I don't think they did it again this year. I don't know.
No, I kept my eye out.
I didn't see any. I didn't see anything about it, so I was like, oh, rats.
Well, and that's the thing, because the reason we didn't have that fourth session was because the election happened. Yeah. And then they literally swapped ministers. Yeah. So it was like immediately after. So all our input, all our notes all gone.
Just floating in the wind now.
Probably passed down to the next person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you had 1 minute and you had the attention of the entire world and you had to say something that they would all accept on education, what would you say to change it?
Oh my God. Stress. Like to change how education is?
Yeah, like what's your primary change? What would you, if you had all the power, what
I think
would you
it's
do?
simple. You need to trust teachers to do their jobs, and they're professionals, and their understanding of the curriculum is like, that's what we know. That's what we learned. So just, if I say you have to do something, just do it. Yeah. And be aware that teachers are human beings and that this is a job and one that we care deeply about, but it is not life.
Yeah.
It's not worth going to your grave over.
I know. I see, again, like the people who put in the 15 hours a day, and I
know.
I'm already pulling away from that a little bit myself, but even though it might not seem that.
Welcome to my dark side. I'm telling you, it's beautiful.
Well, because again, I almost feel, so do you remember Conrad Drover?
Yeah.
So he said, he said this to me one time, because I asked him, like, oh, like, what do you think about teaching? He said, you know what? Sometimes I feel like I'm robbing society, and sometimes I feel like society is robbing me. And I was like, that is the greatest quote I've ever heard.
Yeah.
But when it comes to what you said about not that like teachers shouldn't be questioned, and maybe I am giving you, but when it comes to, I give an assignment and they're like, why should I do this? I'm like, I'm trying to help you build I don't like, what do you mean? We do the work. I have my effort to like consolidate it before we move on. I feel like that's the purpose of our assignment. So why are you, they just don't, I find there is a lot of general distrust that we don't know what we're doing, or we're indoctrinating or whatever.
Oh my God. If I was indoctrinating your child, let me tell you, I would indoctrinate them to bring a pencil to class and
a sharpener,
pull up your pants and sit in your chair and stop wandering around the school. And that's what I would be indoctrinating them.
Don't vape in the bathroom.
Don't be a jerk to the person beside you. Just be a good person. That's where I would be indoctrinating them. Yeah. Please, but they don't listen to me. Yeah. So,
and none of them ever want to be teachers. So I'm clearly doing something wrong. So would you recommend someone to go into teaching?
No.
Why?
No. It's this like weight. And it feels heavier and heavier every year. And usually I come back in the September and I feel refreshed and I feel excited about something. And every year I'm a little bit less excited and a little bit more underwater. And I don't think that's a good quality of life for anybody. And I hope that my own child never even thinks about this as a career. But I don't know what else to do with myself. So this is what I'm good at.
But that's the scary part where I find I'm just starting out in the profession. I've never even considered doing something else. So I wouldn't even know, but I almost find it shocking how many people would jump ship immediately. If they said, you can do this other job for the same, if not even 15% less money.
I'd take a pay cut.
Yeah. And so where is it going? Is there a crisis point? Are we in the crisis point? What does that?
I think we're at the tipping grounds. I think it could go either way at this point.
So what do you mean by go either way? What ways are we going potentially? What are our two routes?
Well, the hard route is we don't have enough teachers for positions, and that's not local. That's a national issue.
Yeah.
If
not an international issue.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, if you look at our neighbors down south, I worked with a girl from the States. Yeah. You could not say enough good things about her as a human. She taught AP history. She has a master's in education from Harvard University. She's a smart cookie, a hard worker, and she quit because, she was pregnant with her first kid. She was given this huge Teacher of the Year award, and the next day she quit her job because they were not recognizing that she needed time off for maternity leave and taking care of tiny humans, and they weren't going to pay her properly for her position. She traveled quite far for her job every day, and that was going to be really hard as a new mom, and there was no recognition of that, so she quit. And now she works at a college, not teaching, but still kind of in education. But and you could not say enough great things about this human, and she got out at the right time, because now it's even crazier, especially in the US, in terms of they don't pay their teachers well enough.
Yeah, so at least in Canada, generally speaking, from what I hear, it's slightly better than in the US. And that would be across the board. So I just don't I don't know. I guess I have a fear that one day I might be one of the people who is responsible for handling a shitstorm. You know what I mean? In terms of I'm 20 years from now in some sort of position that's like, how do you solve this issue? Like, what do teachers need? Because the whole thing about when I was growing up was, don't be a teacher because you'll never find a job. Like there's so many, you'll never be able to.
There were not enough positions for all of us.
Yeah, like that'll never happen. Now it's like you can go wherever you want, and that's been almost a shock.
Well, you look at Quebec. The beginning of the year, they were saying, "Well, we'll promise an adult body in a room, but we don't promise that they're even like university educated."
And that's public and private. It's not like it's just that. Oh, now people are moving, because that's the thing. It's usually. The rhetoric is, okay, they are trying to dismantle the public system so we can move into private. Yeah. But no one wants to be teaching public or private.
No,
it's not like
way.
There's
and I've
this.
Taught both.
Yeah.
Taught private, did not get paid well. Really, like the hours of work was crazy.
How is it different?
So in my experience anyway, the expectation was a lot higher because the parents paid a lot of money for their kids to go there. And so we had to, it was a service. They were our client. And I feel like public is starting to feel a lot more like that. But at the time it wasn't. And I didn't get paid. I got paid like a third of what a
which is crazy, because I can't imagine right now if all of my students' parents were also paying like 15 grand a year to be in my room,
right?
And getting paid the same. Like you have so much more like business weight on top of that. That's crazy. But.
And then we had to provide a lot of like extracurricular services and stuff like this. This was in Toronto, so a lot of the kids' parents were working long hours, and we basically had like a babysitting service after school and everything so that their parents could come pick them up because there was no buses for them. And then I've also worked in Quebec, and I know what that kind of system is like, and
so what do you mean by kind of system?
The way they treat their teachers there. When I was there, it was great. So the fact that Quebec is losing teachers and not able to retain them is question. It is concerning.
And it was always back then when I was in high school, you would hear, like you can get a job in places like Nunavut and Fort McMurray for your first year. Like that's where you go. That's where you'll get your spot.
Get your experience.
Yeah. And you get your experience and you can kind of move outward. But then I would even hear stories like people would move away and then it would be years later, they still don't have their permanent contract. But now it's actually like Ontario, Quebec, Eastern Canada, BC, like it's literally everywhere. Which is, I guess, kind of freeing as a teacher, because now you can be like, okay, if I go 1 year here and I hate it, I'll go over to this place. Like there's a bit more kind of, maybe leverage is the wrong word, but it's like, well, you have a bit more autonomy, I guess, to kind of choose where you want to be. Because it's like, if they start shitting all over you, it's kind of funny because in Fort McMurray, like, I'll just go to the district next door.
I'll go to another one. It's fine.
So
if this is not going to work for you, just let me know and I'll get out.
And so I have one more question to ask you. Okay. So I heard this quote, another quote. I know I'm a big quote guy. It said, education is what remains once you forget everything that you learned in school. So as a teacher, for you, what is it like that the values you want to instill in your students that's separate from the actual curriculum that you're teaching them?
Basically anything that is worth having is worth working for, and you need to put in the work if you really want something. That goals are important, because if you're just floundering around hoping life's going to happen for you, that it won't. You need to work for something. And if you work for something and it doesn't work out, figure something else out. And that it doesn't make it less valuable. The experience is super important. And then just be a good human. Treat the world well, treat people well, treat yourself well, but have expectations also for how people treat you. And if they come out of school with any of that, then I feel like I've done something
Yeah.
for the world. And that's what I need to do, something.
So I heard the other day, it was like self-love is just holding yourself to a higher standard.
Yeah.
And that's not just being a perfectionist, but that's like understanding there's a certain way that people should be treating you. And like, if they don't be afraid to move on from them.
See you later.
Like, hasta lucia.
Yeah.
It's been great getting to know you, but
you're not in my life anymore because you're not adding value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Wish someone taught me that, but took a while.
All right. Thank you, Kelly.
Anytime.
Appreciate it. Cool. Hey everyone, thank you all for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. Just wanted to say again, if there are any issues with professional conduct and or you would like to share your own story, experience, or have something you would like to contribute to the show, please do not hesitate to reach out at lucasrdclark97@gmail.com or send a direct message on Instagram to @MrClarkAfterDark. Hope you all enjoyed, potentially found something of use, and of course, please do not forget to subscribe. See you guys all next time. Unless you're scared.